national championship game, man. And the statement that I'm about to utter, if I were to say this 2, 3 years ago, you would have assumed that I was talking about either an EA college football dynasty, or for those of you who are a little bit older, an NCAA 14 dynasty for those that played a ton of NCAA 14 like I did. Indiana, your national champion. They defeat the Miami Hurricanes 27-21 is their final score. Not only does it represent Indiana winning its very first national championship in school history in football, but guys, I don't think people understand just how significant this moment is. Well,
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that Indiana in the year of our Lord 2026 would win a national championship in football? In football, with a kid from right down the street from Miami, Florida, and Fernando Mendoza, and some random guy named Kurt Signetti out of the rafters, like it's a WWE match. Kurt Signetti is redefining the sport, not only in the transfer portal era, but as we go forward into the sport in general. And it's cliche because a lot of people, especially on Twitter, for instance, are talking about oh, what teams can replicate what Indiana's done this season and last year in Signetti's first year. It will never be done ever again.
Never.
To take one of the most losing programs ever in Division One football and bring them to the summit, undefeated 16-0 season, being talks with the likes of some of the greatest teams ever, for instance, 2019 LSU, some things, will never be replicated. And I believe that this feat Indiana has accomplished will never be accomplished ever again. We will never see a feat like it again. It's basically saying like Rice is going to win the national championship in 2 years because they get some X-name coach, get 50 guys from the transfer portal, and majority of them come to follow that coach. Like, you're never going to see that ever happen again. So, hats off to Kurt Signetti in Indiana. Unbelievable season. Fernando Mendoza, the first Heisman Trophy winner in school history. It'll never be replicated ever again. That's my biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the greatest story in the history of sports. I mean, 20 years from now, we're going to have documentaries, 30 for 30s on these every weekend. I mean, it's irreplicable. I can't say that word. But my thing I want to circle to is people are saying that NIL is the reason for this leveling the playing field. And I want to throw out there, I don't agree with that because Indiana wasn't one of the big spenders this past offseason. They brought in a great coach. Signetti brought his guys from JMU. Some of their primary guys were JMU guys. Yeah, Mendoza wasn't, obviously. Omar Cooper wasn't. But these guys were culture guys that he brought in and was able to get to blend and won on the power of friendship. They didn't win due to NIL, and I think it's one of those stories, man, that, like I said, we're going to look back on and be like, holy cow, that actually happened, and it'll never be repeated. We'll never see that happen again. People can say NIL's leveled the playing field, but it really hasn't. These lower level teams still, we saw Texas Tech ultimately have to spend the most money in the transfer portal, and they got smoked in round one. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen unless you find a culture guy in Signetti. But props to Indiana. What they did was awesome. I wish the Cleveland Browns could somehow draft Fernando Mendoza, but it is what it is. They'll be back next year. No matter what people say, they'll be a top 10 team in the playoffs next year.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that people need to realize. This Indiana team, and I know we're going to definitely touch up on it a little bit, where this team is not going to go away anytime soon. The 2024 team and that team even went to the college football playoff. Granted, they got knocked out in the first round. That's probably going to be the least talented team that Kirk Cinetti is going to have. Just the way that he's building his culture in a short time. And really just talking about some of the pieces that he's bringing in, next year and beyond, not only in the high school ranks, but also talking about in the transfer portal as well. I mean, this Indiana team is here to stay. I know that like Josh Pay talked about how, this is more likely than not going to be an anomaly. I'm not sure that's going to be the case, to be honest with you. Especially in this era of college football where, we have seen such an unprecedented amount of movement. So we're really at a point where you see a lot more guys that are thinking about I instead of like thinking about the team. It's a lot different era than even when I was in college athletics, like in the mid 2010s, and definitely a different environment from Reed. I know you touched up on you played some college football yourself out in like the beautiful Julietta, and it's just a different environment nowadays. That being said, though, with everything that happened in this national championship game, I sat there, watching this game, and then I watched the highlights the next morning, and I couldn't help but think to myself, to be honest, Miami really should have won that game, all things considered. I remember like there was two key penalties late in the second quarter where there was one penalty that was a pass interference that did end up going and giving Indiana first down, and then on a 3rd and 13, I believe they had an offsides instead of another opportunity to pick up a third down. They end up picking up the first down. That leads to the first and only offensive touchdown in the first half. And then you think about the punt block that we saw. That led to another touchdown for Indiana. The missed field goal for Miami towards the end of the first half. I mean, Miami spotted Indiana 17 points. Spotted 17 points in a national championship game. And yet here they were late in the game. They had a chance to win it on the back of Carson Beck. And Carson Beck throws an interception. So one of the things that I talked about in my preview, like here on the channel, was, I mean, Miami had to play a similarly clean game than Indiana. They weren't even close to doing that, to be honest with you, and yet they still almost found a way to win this thing.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the things that stood out to me, going into the game, I thought Miami had an edge, on the offensive line versus their defensive line. Everyone was talking about, the size severity between Miami's offensive line to Indiana's defensive line. The biggest offensive line for Miami was 6'7", 320 pounds versus Stephen Daly, who was the biggest defensive lineman for Indiana at only 6'1". I think he was like 280, 290, something like that. So that was the biggest thing for me. And Miami didn't even have that bad of a game on the ground. Mark Fletcher ran 17 for 112 and 2 touchdowns. His I think it was 55 or 56-yard touchdown was the longest rushing touchdown Indiana had given up since the very first game and play of the season, to one Colton Joseph of Old Dominion. Shout out to him. He's now at Wisconsin. But now, like, that would never have been the case, because Indiana all season has been flawless in their technique and their assignments. They were one of the most clean, one of the cleanest teams to watch play football ever. Rarely got penalized. If they did, it was like holding, offsides, like something against the grain. They were very disciplined. They knew exactly where they were going, like in their run blocking. If you have a duo between a guard and a center going up on the nose tackle to the linebacker, like they were perfect in every facet of their game. So to me, I agree with you, Jake. Miami did have plenty of chances to win this game. They arguably were the more athletic team on the field, but Indiana was the better team, the more cohesive unit on the field. And also want to give a shout out, because in my preview to the season on Indiana, I had them 13th ranked going into the season. I didn't think they were going to go on to win the national championship. I thought they could have made the playoff, but a player that really stood out to me all year that no one really seemed to talk about, going into the year about Indiana, Roman Hemby is one of the unsung heroes for this team. Everyone knows Kalen Black as well, because he transferred in from JMU. Roman Hemby was at Maryland last year, and I had said going into the season that he would have been one of the best transfer portal pickups going into this year. And look what happened to it. They were a top 5 rushing team in the country. They leaned on their run game at points in that game. Fernando Mendoza obviously didn't play his cleanest game, had the massive 4th and 4 in the red zone, QB draw, unbelievable call, to make that play in the red zone at that time in the game, late in the 4th quarter when you need it. So unbelievable job by Indiana. One of the cleanest, teams you would have seen play football all year. So, hats off to them, just schematically and, discipline wise, just very clean on all sides.
Yeah, I mean, you guys basically said everything. The margin for error just was so minimal, and you don't see that very often in football games anymore, as much as you used to back in the day when we were in high school and middle school and stuff. But now, I mean, every single play mattered. The two back shoulder fades of Charlie Beckner, the missed field goal, the jumping off sides. I mean, every single play mattered and made a difference. Kurt Signetti going forward on 4th and 5 and Mendoza running it in. But circling off that play, my question to you guys, would you guys have went for that or kicked it in that situation? And then at the end of the game, would you have kicked it to go up 6 or went for it again?
So I'm going to be honest. When I saw that he was going for it on 4th and 5 originally, I originally thought that he was doing it with the intent to try to draw Miami off sides and pick up an early first down, and then use one of his timeouts and end up like kicking the field goal. So to be honest with you, I do not have the the same nuts that Kirk Cinetti has. But listen, credit to Kirk Cinetti in that moment. Really putting his nuts on his shoulders. Trusting his Heisman quarterback to go and make a play, and not only picking up that first down, but diving into the end zone. I mean, him diving into the end zone to put Indiana up by, I believe it was up 10 at that point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
I mean, that dive, you got to hang that up in the Louvre. I mean, it was an incredible play by an incredible football player.
Yeah, the first 4th down where Mendoza scored, I liked the go for it call solely because you're already deep into their territory. Where were they? Like the 14, 13, around they were in the red zone. So basically, if you don't get that, Miami already has to drive the length of the field to score a touchdown to take the lead at that point. So I don't mind that call. The field goal late in the game, I think, is a smart call because your defense had, they've been your backbone all year. Those are the moments that you rely on your defense the most. So I feel like the second time was the right call to just kick the field goal, and let's put it on the shoulders of our defense. Our defense has carried us all year. A top 5 unit in most statistical categories. So let's see what they got. And it led to the Beck interception. So yeah, I think Signetti showed a lot of poise in those moments, solely because he did have the field goal unit out there on the first try, called a timeout, brought him back over, and then end up going for it. That if he did kick the field goal, then we could be talking about a completely different story right now.
Yeah, I believe I actually texted you guys when he called the timeout and literally said, go for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a Buckeye fan. Ryan Day has always kicked in that situation, and it's lost us game after game for the last.
But you need a kicker for that.
Yeah, we've game after game for the last 7 years. 4th and 1 this year against Indiana. Kicked the field goal and missed. Could have scored a touchdown. Didn't. Obviously, we've lost 2 games to Michigan because of that, not going for it on 4th down. I would have said at the end of the game also to go for it. My reasoning for this, I think a team plays a lot more aggressive when they have to score a touchdown, obviously. And the previous 2 drives, Miami had went right down the field on Indiana and scored a touchdown and then kicked the field goal the prior maybe. Or they had just went right down the field. I was just like, I'm going for it. You win the game right here with 1 play. So I was keen on going for it in that situation as well. But worked out. I was obviously wrong. So.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought about that. But I mean, with that being said, I think about what Kurt Cinetti has done just in his first 2 years. And I feel bad for any new coach that's going to be taking a new Power 4 job. Like the Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas, or thinking about like John Summerall at Florida, also taking the job. Eric Morrison at Oklahoma State. I mean, all of those guys are now going to have heightened expectations going forward, because you're looking at a spot where you simply cannot preach patience the same way that you could preach patience 5 to 10 years ago. Just because not only Signetti, taking a team that was poverty a couple of years ago and taking them to a national championship in the span of 2 years, but we're talking about a team that historically is the losingest program in the sport. and taking them to a national championship game in the span of 2 years. And like your Oklahoma States, your Floridas, and even your Arkansas. Like all those schools have richer history than Indiana did. So it's going to be tough for these coaches going forward. I can certainly see a spot where in the next 5 years we're going to see an uptick in coaches being fired.
Yeah, I feel like that because of the parity with the transfer portal and NIL and everything, you're going to see a lot of teams. We've seen it in the first 2 years. I mean, Indiana is a great example. Like they literally came out of nowhere, built a team from guys that Signetti recruited originally, JMU, and just competed at a completely higher level. The biggest thing with the transfer portal now is that you're going to see a lot of teams with parity. For example, Oklahoma State getting the entire North Texas roster. Is that going to be an immediate ascension from going dead last in the conference to competing for a conference championship? We don't know until we see that. So, again, it's going to be really hard to replicate what Signetti's done at Indiana. I mean, I literally don't have words to explain it because it's never been seen before. So this is the one sample size that we have. So, I mean, it's going to be hard to replicate. But I agree, Jake. A lot of these newer coaches that do have expectations, bringing in a bunch of guys from their previous school, taking a level up, like Summerall, Golish to Auburn, Silverfield. I mean, all those guys went from the American to now playing in the SEC, which is arguably the best conference in America. So, what is that going to translate to? That level of play that they had at those schools in that conference, is that going to automatically translate, or is there going to be time? Are these schools even going to give them time? Because these schools, I feel like, have such short a leash now that if their team doesn't find success in 2 years, especially in this area of the portal where you can essentially get any player you want if you throw enough money at them, like how short is the leash going to be on these coaches? Like, how much time are we really going to give them? That's my biggest question.
Yeah, would you guys say that like Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech are probably the only two next year with the chance to replicate what Indiana did or something close to it? Or is there other teams you guys got in mind that brought in classes that we could see that flip to go from bottom 5 in their conference to top 3 in their conference?
Yeah, so I think about Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech, and I don't even think that those are fair comparisons in terms of what Indiana did, right? Because at least like you look at Oklahoma State, there's been times in my lifetime where Oklahoma State was very relevant in the college football world, and ditto to like Virginia Tech. Shout out to the the Enter Sandman entrance, one of the best entrances in college football. So when I think about people talking about who is the next Indiana, I'm thinking of programs that really haven't done anything in my lifetime. In the last like 35 to 40 years. I'm not talking about just treading water. I'm just talking about like just really generally last 35 to 40 years being booty cheeks in football. Like I'm thinking of really Rutgers, like outside of Greg Schiano, maybe. I honestly have a hard time thinking of what that next school would look like because we've never seen it before, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I piggyback off Rutgers because that's also been thrown out a lot. I mean, a handful of those Big Ten schools come to mind immediately. Rutgers, Minnesota, Northwestern, who else is a laughing stock? Like Maryland, for instance. Like, it's so hard to single out schools, Brody, like Virginia Tech or Oklahoma State or like Auburn. Can Auburn get back to the summit? In this current era, like it's so hard to single out a team because literally any team could do it in this day and age. So I personally think in the current model, these schools are doing it the right way, in the sense you hire a coach, you expect him to bring a bunch of his talent that he already had. For example, like I'm a Penn State guy. We all know this. Matt Campbell brought a good, 60, 70% of his starters with him to Penn State. I have no idea how that's going to translate to the Big Ten. We have a favorable schedule coming up, but I have no idea how that's going to translate. Offensively, I have a good idea because we bring the offensive coordinator, we bring Rocco Becht over, we bring his top 3 receivers, we bring a few O linemen, we bring a starting running back, starting tight end. So I have a good idea. Relatively like to that side of the ball. Defensively, I have no idea because we have Danton Lynn coming over from USC and a bunch of players from around the country defensively. So to wrap up my point, I feel like it's really hard to single out a team just based on, like we've said, we've only seen one sample size of this. So literally any team could do this if they have enough resources, the right coaching staff, and the right mentality. And just real quick on that mentality portion, I don't know if you've guys seen the clip of Kirk Herbstreit talking about it. I think it was after the semifinal game, the Ole Miss Miami game. He was talking about a collective team. That's what you need in this day and age. It's not about throwing money at the best players possible and basically just making a super team like it's the Golden State Warriors in 2016. You can't do that. You need to get guys that are committed to what your philosophy is. And I hate to use the word culture now because especially in the day and age that we live in, culture is completely thrown out the door. It's really the philosophy that your head coach and coaching staff has. Are you bought into that 110%? And do you have enough guys in your team that are bought into that philosophy? Because I think that goes the longest way to, the goals that you set for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And, again, it's going to be really interesting to see how everything unfolds. And really just thinking about, just from the patient aspect, I think that's something that's not only going to affect the new coaches, but also like we talked about with from Penn State to Virginia Tech, we've seen that affected with James Franklin. I mean, this is a guy where this time last year, he led his team to the semifinals of the college football playoff. It was extremely close to having an opportunity to play for a national championship game. To see him get fired in the middle of next season, I mean, I understand that the big games just were not there for James Franklin. I completely understand that. I was surprised that I would figure there would be some equity built up, just from having that deep playoff run in the last season. So I think it's something to monitor in the future, not only in the sense of how these new coaches that are coming up are going to be affected from a patient standpoint from college administrators, but also some of these more tenured coaches as well. Maybe is Dabo like someone that is getting a little bit warmer on the seat, with how lackluster his last 2 seasons have been.